So you know what they say about when they clap before your talk, right? It's hope. So they clap afterwards, you did okay. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to take this jacket off. I always do this as a sign of respect to you, but I don't wear jackets, and I pack it up and bring it along. So there you saw I wore it. So thank you so much, Andy, for that invitation, that introduction, and the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm really thrilled to have a chance to talk with you a little bit about innovation, very broadly, the term. We'll dig into that a little bit. I did some apologies this morning already to folks. I said, I hope I won't say anything that will offend anybody in the room. What I'm going to try to do with you is to share Penn State's perspective, Penn State's view, my work in this field, which sometimes makes us a little uncomfortable at home as well. So this whole domain about innovation is something I think we all are a little bit challenged by. And we're not exactly sure what it means. So where's our guest speaker? Dr. Cortez this morning says the terms that we use and don't always have complete agreement of what they mean. We say something and we both nod because we think we know what we're saying. Turns out to be a little bit different. So did I mention the quiz? I did mention that. There's a little piece of paper on your table there. If you'd peel a piece of paper off and grab a pen, I'm going to start off with a brief quiz. Those folks online as well, if you just grab a piece of paper, I have two questions for you. Should be fairly light lifting. This is the part that can get a little embarrassing. I'm not going to ask you to embarrass yourself, but I'm just kind of curious. On a scale of 1 to 10, write down the number for this question. How innovative do you think Ashford University is? Scale of 1 to 10. I'm not going to ask you to share this publicly, so this has got to be really your thinking. Okay, on the second question is on a scale of 1 to 10, how innovative do you think you are? Scale of 1 to 10. I told you there are two questions, but I lied. There's actually a third. So this is the last one. What the heck is innovation? And we can do that one as an open conversation. You don't have to write that down. But does anyone want to offer to me what you think the term innovation means? And I know we have some, Kate is going to channel for us from our guest online. Does anyone want to throw out an idea, suggestion? And you got to be really careful, because if you go for your eye, I think you put your hand up and then we get you to say, oh, would you share yours? But I got a hand up in the back, so go ahead. And I know we have to get the mics around to you.
Okay, so I'm just...
So off the top of your head, right, because you hadn't had prep. You didn't study for this quiz, right?
No, I'm just going to say forward thinking.
Forward thinking. Okay, good, good. Another word, Andy?
Seeing the earlier talk, this is one of those examples of a word that sort of starts to mean nothing because it means so many different things to everybody. What I want it to mean is what I'm going to say, which is the fusion of critical thinking and creativity.
Fusion of critical thinking and creativity. Okay, good, good. Mike?
I would just say doing things in new ways.
Doing things in new ways.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. All right, so let me ask you this question. How many people in the room feel as though you have a responsibility toward innovation, that you need to be an innovator? Okay, I'm going to see, I think every hand in the room went up. So we all feel at some level that we have a requirement to continue to innovate, although we're not always sure exactly what that means. So what I'd like to do today is to give you, see if I have the same issue. Where's Kirk? Oh, Kirk, I don't know if I had maybe this timed out. But what I'm going to try to do for you is to give you a bit of a framework of how we, Kirk, we did have this working today, didn't we, right beforehand? Think it'll go? Maybe it has to wake up. Okay, hang in there, folks online. We're coming. I'm not getting anything. So one of the issues I think we have as a community is to figure out what our relationship is to innovation, what our relationship is both personally and professionally, and then what is the responsibility of the organization itself. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of a framework. Actually, I'm going to do it all from one slide. So this is really going to be an interesting experience today. Thank you, Kirk, for putting me in this position. You know, he used to be in State College, and I think he said, I'm going to get him back today. I don't mean to make you sweat. You're in the sweater, not me. So one of the things I'd like to do today is to give you a little bit of a framework for a project that we're taking on at Penn State that looks at trying to set the table, if you will, for how we do innovation within a university. But I'm going to explain to you the why of that as well. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what exactly innovation is, or maybe what it's not. Thank you, sir. So what it is and what it isn't. And then we're going to talk a little bit toward the end about kind of a call to action. Where and how do you fit in? What might you do in this space? So let's start with the broad one, which is the nature of innovation. And so in preparation of this, I spent a little bit of time going out looking at different definitions and saying, well, which one do I think it is? I'm going to tell you a story in a minute about another unit I was with called the Center for Online Innovation in Learning. For 5 years. And for 5 years, we argued, it was a little core of directors, about exactly what the term innovation meant. I don't think we ever came to a final agreement, and it morphed and changed all the time. So we all feel like we need it, but then I say see number one again, which means that it has multiple meanings for you. Oftentimes, innovation or change, if you think of it that way, is forced by something happening externally. Or it could be internally, but something is generating or creating that change. The ideas I discovered, this is something that took me a while to figure out. I used to think of myself, I still do, as a fairly creative person. I can create new ideas for you. Give me two things and I'll put them together and have a new idea, right? Which is fun, but it's not necessarily innovative. And the innovation really comes from the fact that you have to be able to do something with that idea. You have to be able to scale it, you have to be able to operationalize it, and so forth. So has anyone in the room by any chance read The Medici Effect? Highly recommend this book. I'm going to blank on the guy's name, but let me just give you the idea. Medici Effects, he talks about instances in life where circumstances have been set up that have led to brand new ideas because of two sometimes very disparate situations coming together. This is, he refers to as the Medici Effect. It has an elephant on the cover, and I'm thinking of what the other thing is, an elephant and a flea or something, and he connects those two. So what we're trying to do at Penn State through this project I'm going to share with you is try to set the table for some of that Medici Effect. The last thing is there's nobody, I don't care who they are, who they think they are, who has the market. You can go online and trust me, you can find innovation.org and innovate.org and this comm and that comm. Everybody wants to sort of claim like they belong to this space, including myself in my current unit and myself in my prior unit. We like to label it as being innovation, and this is our role. The fact of the matter is, all the time, all of us are in a situation of needing to think creatively about things. So let me give you a couple ideas, big thoughts around this term that I came up with. One is what I like to see what Steve Jobs wrote. It's the ability to see change as an opportunity, not as a threat. Another one is innovation is a mindset, so it's not a thing or an end place, but it's a frame of work, a frame of process, or a frame of looking at something. It's not the end game. Recently, I saw a presentation a colleague of mine did about this network, the EdTech network. I'm going to tell you in a minute. And it had all this really neat stuff together. And in the center of it, it had the word innovation. And it really sort of struck me as that's the wrong place. Innovation isn't in the center of that. Innovation is all of this other stuff that happens outside. The question is, what's in the center for you? In our case, our center is driving toward a better student experience. That's what's driving not only Penn State, but as I'll talk to you about the EdTech network. So that's where I come back to this idea. It's really a process. And finally, the ideas are cheap. We can sit around and generate those all day, and they're fun. The creating the lasting change, bringing the idea to become an innovation where it's applied is actually causing real change is a dynamic. This is the final one I kind of settled on. I didn't author this. I drew it from a couple different sources, but I really liked it. It's a process. It's a thing we do. I'd like to suggest it's a thing we do all the time, like I'm constantly in this mindset. And we're trying to add value to a community in the form of a solution. So today what we're going to do is peel that out back a little bit and look at the idea of how do we do that for our students. Where is the opportunity for us to add value to their learning experience? At lunchtime, I was talking to Jody and Jeff about the idea of what it is we provide for our learners. And I think we have sometimes really big ideas, like we want to create this amazing learning experience and this tremendous community and on, right? We want to do that. We think this is terrific. Turns out, if that really doesn't create an added value for our learners, they're saying, hey, I love the fact that you have a club, but you know what? I live in my community. I'm 35 years old. I've got 2 kids. I got plenty of clubs. I don't need another club to belong to. But sometimes our idea of what is innovation and innovative may not resonate with our community. And I think that's one of the points we always want to come back to and consider. So this is just a thought process for you to maybe consider for a little bit. But in your work, do you feel like you can be providing value, added value to your students' learning experience? Is that something that you're able to impact? I would offer that in this room, because of who you are and the organization you belong to, that you do believe this, that you think in everything you do in all parts of your work, that you do think you can add value to your student experiences, or you might not be here. Second question is, do you continually work at that? So the downside here, the challenge I might say, is that oftentimes in my organization at Penn State, the World Campus, Andy mentioned the World Campus a bit ago. World Campus was started in 1998. Right after I invented the internet, I invented the World Campus. Morgan, it's not a joke, that's the truth. Okay, so the interesting thing about the World Campus was that process and that project was that it took, a period of time, I'd say 5-7 years till we got it sort of stabilized. It was very disruptive to the university. The rest of the university didn't care for it. We don't teach that way, we're about traditional. And the innovation, after a while, got pounded out of us. And here's why. After about 7 or 8 years, guess what we began to earn? Revenue. Where'd the revenue go? Revenue went back to the academic units. They liked that. They thought, no, that's innovative, right? They liked that. Problem was, they began to get used to that revenue. And innovation takes resources, it takes time, it takes dollars and so forth. And we were in a position of being told by the academic units, hey, don't do anything that's going to mess with that income, that revenue stream coming back into us. So by the way of it being pounded out of us, I say that we were encouraged, not forced, but encouraged to streamline, do things, do more with less. You've all heard this terminology, work smarter, not harder. And so the challenge, the dilemma is, how do we continue to think innovatively in our space and still be efficient and effective? And what I'm going to try to lay out for you a little bit today are some ideas of how we're trying to do that in our organization within Penn State, to create a structure, if you will, for how we might be able to add that value to our community. So I know a lot of us probably think that innovation is this big transformational thing. So I was thinking of an example. Dang, I couldn't come up, there's a gajillion of them, but the only example I could come up with was my fishing boots. So my fishing boots have these really cool little hooks. They used to be, you had to put the string through the, now they have these hooks that you could just wrap your thing. And I thought, well, is that an innovation? Yeah, it's actually an incremental tweak of something that already exists. Makes my life a little easier when I'm out, putting my boots on. But having a segue, which moves me around and does it in a different way than I had before, that's kind of a transformational experience. That's a radically different experience. By the way, I wouldn't recommend taking your Segway into the stream. It does not work real well. You thought you fell forward before. Trust me, it doesn't. But my point here is that don't think about innovation or being innovative as always needing to be this big transformational thing. There are few people, Steve Jobs being one of the most pointed to, who think that way or thought that way a lot. And he produced products, whether we knew it or liked it or not, that fundamentally transformed our lives. I can remember the first time walking around with my iPod and it dawning on me that my entire collection of albums and records and such was in my pocket. You know, that was a pretty transformation. What that allowed me to be able to do was pretty cool. I'm going to encourage you to think about this whole continuum and not worrying about always having to hit it out of the park up here at the transformational end. We can do things that are tweaks that are still innovative improvements that add value for our community. So this is the ecosystem that we sort of refer to at Penn State. This is fairly new, and by fairly new, in honesty, it's probably about 6 years, going on 6 years old. The current iteration of it, I'll explain in a moment, is not even 6 months. But I'll just walk you through how we do it. And the idea was, I always love this quote, by the way, if you haven't seen this. Chance, that is maybe the combination, that Medici effect thing, is going to happen when you're open, when you have that prepared mind, when you're ready to see and observe changes that can happen. And to me, that's a really cool place to be. My job, which Andy introduced as the principal community aggregator, or the way I like to call it, the principal community agitator, is to stimulate that chance, right? To set the table in places for people to be thinking differently, to bring diversity to our ideas so that we communicate and allow for new inventions, new ideas, and so forth to come forward. So I'm going to just set the table at a high level. After the tragedy at Penn State in 2012 with the Jerry Sandusky scandal, I'm sure you all are familiar with, we had a new president, new provost come in the next 3 or 4 years. It took a little time until that got straightened out. New president was Eric Barron. Dr. Barron came from Florida State. One of the things at Florida State that Dr. Barron did was he really tapped in and harnessed the academic resources within Florida State to create an innovation engine. Right? And he got to Penn State after about a year. He's kind of, not even a year, I think. He's looking around and saying, where are you guys, how are you like stimulating and generating new ideas, new change moments at the university? And we said, oh, we're doing that. There's somebody over in material sciences is doing that. And I think there's somebody over in agriculture. And he said, no, we've really got to think about how do we create an ecosystem where innovation is creating new opportunity for new events to occur. So his project is called Invent Penn State. One of the ideas he's had from the very beginning is that we mix. This goes to that idea of the diversity, right? A really interesting phenomena here is this group right here, the undergraduates. Undergraduate students aren't always thought of as a part of our ecosystem except for as consumers, not always thought of as contributors or partners, and that's one of the things we're trying to change. So his goals for Invent Penn State were to use innovation as an economic development engine within our community, which is a central region, a very rural area of Pennsylvania. If you've ever been, we like to say it's equally inaccessible from any point in the state. Matter of fact, I know this because I had to fly out of it yesterday, and it's 2 geese. They're well trained, but they flap out of state. I don't enjoy flying out of there. It's on a prop plane, believe it or not. He's interested in generating more and sustaining more job creation in our community. And here's the really interesting one for me, the one that resonates with me, is this idea about ensuring student career success. So how do we create the best environment that our learners, when they graduate, have had a sense of creation, of connection, of energy, so when they enter the marketplace, they're bringing net new value, not just content domain, specificity to their new job. So within that, let me back up a half a step. I mentioned this one about in 2012, a new unit was formed out of the World Campus, if you will, called the Center for Online Innovation Learning. Now, I was the director of this unit, and to be honest, the unit was a little bit loosely defined and loosely accountable. Our job was pretty broad and pretty general, was go out and create a culture within the university of exploration, discovery, innovation. Not necessarily toward any one outcome, pretty broad. The second one was create a system or a method for stimulating that invention, which we did through research grants. Bring in speakers, which we did. And then, as Andy mentioned, participate in leadership development, which we did through IELOL and through a Fisher speaker series. So we were doing that very nicely, thank you, for 5 years. Until we started to think about how can we leverage that engine into something new. So I mentioned Invent Penn State. Invent Penn State has several verticals. Looking around the university, the leadership felt we have an opportunity here to take resources, bring them together in different kinds of ways, aggregate these different communities, if you will, to create new things. Our communities would be our faculty and staff, and in my opinion, an untapped resource in our community is staff. Think about staff. Staff members often work in research labs, or they work as assistants to professors. They're running the computer building. But individuals who are very close to a particular domain or a particular exercise who aren't actually teaching that, sometimes they do, but their main role is in kind of the support. Boy, they know that content domain. They know their work. And oftentimes, they have wonderful ideas on how to improve processes and systems and products, if you will, at Penn State. Students, we talked about a little bit. Just for the record, we think mostly of graduate students in this space. They are with the faculty because they're behaving in a graduate level, they're kind of behaving more like a faculty member and less like an undergraduate student. Companies, so this is a little different. This is different for me because I do not come out of the corporate world at all in my career. And all of a sudden, we're now talking about partnerships, which I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit, with companies. So what does that mean? I mean, we've always had companies as a vendor, right? They are always selling us something. But we wanted to change the language and talk to these companies, industry leaders, if you will, as partners. And that's changed a little bit of the language of how we see things. And finally, entrepreneurs, both locally, but also regionally or countrywide. Find people who are interested in startups. Again, go back to President Barron's goal, stimulating economic growth, right? So this just dawned on me, I swear, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I thought, in 1998, when the university had the idea, and it was then Graham Spanier, you may have heard his name in other contexts, but Graham Spanier had the idea of creating the World Campus, right? He was really the driver behind that. He was the leader behind that initiative. And one of his goals in the World Campus was to create a system that generated net new revenue. So he said from the very beginning, don't create an organization or a program that cherry picks students on campus. That's not success. Success is when you bring us new students in a new format who are generating new revenue. Now, again, at the time, I can remember kind of going like, oh, I'm not about revenue generation. That's not what I do. Right? I was doing at the time, I was the director of instructional design at the time. But the more we worked on that, the more I realized what we were doing was still meeting my need to serve in an education role, which was giving students access, new students access to a Penn State experience. So what we're trying to do by mixing these various groups is find a way to create a synergy between them so that we get new outcomes. So there's our goals in the EdTech network. So it's the Educational Technology Network. One of the things the university realized is that we have a unique gathering of individuals who have educational experience and instructional technology experience. Roughly told, if you added them all up, somewhere in the order of 200, maybe 250 some people who have a label of instructional designer or instructional production assistant or a media developer. But that's a pretty, now this is across our institution, which is a very large, as you know, large institution. So that, you've got a really big collective group there, a lot of them, staff members. And what we're trying to do with this is to try to figure out how do we leverage that community around creating new educational technology products. That's the outcome. We create those products, we bring together our community, and we're able to then to create a new revenue stream. The first goal has always been talking about the student experience. How do we make the student experience a more added value, a richer, a deeper interaction with their institution? The second is, how do we foster innovation? How do we get people across the institution thinking about doing things differently? And thirdly, then, where and when do we contribute to the economic revenue of the university? How do we create an engine that does that? So we use a couple different systems to create sort of this ecosystem, and that's what I sort of want to walk through a little bit with you. So you look at this range of technologies. By the way, this is the top 20. Is anyone aware of the top 200 educational technology survey that's done every year? I forget the name of the individual, but they do it every year. They go out and survey instructional designers and faculty and say, what are the top 200? And obviously the list goes on. I just cherry-picked the top 20. And if you look at these top 20, you probably recognize a lot of the names up there, right? They're pretty standard. So when we started to think about educational technology, how do we harness the innovation around educational technology, we initially thought, well, let's just support and manage these. But we decided to take a slightly different approach, and we picked one. In the domain that we picked, the infrastructure, if you will, was artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, something very related called machine learning. We decided, upon looking at this from a high level, that there was a lot that's going to be happening in this domain. How many of you in the room could tell me what artificial intelligence is? Anybody? Couple? How about machine learning? Couple? Okay. So with that, let me give you just a little bit of a background of how we're using some of this language. Artificial intelligence is this science and engineering of making machines smarter. So if you used your cell phone today, you were using AI. If you bought something on Amazon or you did a Google search, I mean, so many of these tools. If you drove your car to work today, and probably the bus you took or the train you took, somehow, somewhere is using artificial intelligence as a part of that engine. The reason I'm bringing this up is around the field and the idea of stimulating innovation. Focusing in on a groundbreaking or an infrastructure type technology gives us an opportunity to focus while still thinking very big and very broad. But we're all sort of pointed in the same direction in this particular domain. I'm not saying this is the domain everyone should take, but our approach was to identify one of those. So we said it's a infrastructure type technology. It's already widely deployed. There's a readiness in the field already for AI machine learning. And this is the one that's most interesting to me, is there's a readiness of products. So if you've seen any of these or heard of any of these, anyone here of Watson? How many of you seen the Bob Dylan commercial with Watson playing, he's talking to Watson the machine? Or you know that Watson, have you heard this story about Watson at Georgia Tech? You heard this? So a student, so they deployed the AI engine of Watson as a tutor, as a TA in a class, and they were measuring whether the students liked it and didn't like it, and they did this empirical study, and it turns out that this TA, her name was Jill Watson, got the highest ratings of all of the TAs that semester. Turns out it was the Watson engine that was built to provide these students. Students didn't know they were interacting with a computer the whole time. Let me ask you, how many people in the room have had a phone call and had a dialogue with someone on the phone, and it took you a while to figure out you weren't actually talking to a person? Has that happened to you yet? It's a very odd feeling, right? Somehow that computer, as you're speaking, figures out what you're saying, builds the next sentence for you. It's a little creepy. But it's real. It's real. And then finally, what you do is you throw off something very broad, like I'm having broccoli for dinner tonight, and then it doesn't know what to do with that, okay? These are the tools in the companies. This is already telling us that there's an incredible amount of foundation work that's being done in this space. And we want to be able to get behind it and understand that and seed that into our community in order to stimulate the kind of change and the kind of innovation that we're working on. We're concentrating right now on the Watson and a product from a company called IPsoft called Amelia. They're out of New York. They're heavy into the insurance and the healthcare industry, but they've also have an AI engine. So some of the disruptions now. So we've got that's the technology piece of it. Of all of the pieces and parts, we said there's 200 best, most used technologies. Then we have to flip it around and say, well, what are we addressing? What are we trying to fix or improve? And those are the disruptions that we have in higher education. I think you folks are probably right on spot with every single one of these, right? This one here on value proposition strikes me as being pertinent to all of us. Not only the government, but also our funding agencies and our students are asking increasingly for evidence, proof of how we are bringing value. If I invest this amount of money in the program, how do I know I'm going to get that out in the length of my career? The evidence of output is changing. You folks are all competency-based? Nope. You're what? You're
more traditional online.
Okay, probably similar to us. We know that some programs have moved to more of a competency-based. There's still a lot of discussion about whether that works, but the bottom line is we're all being tasked with proving the efficacy of our output. Are students able to get jobs and do those jobs, advance them in their careers? Affordability. So this is where we're kind of seeing the combination, if you will, or the intersection. This is the Medici effect for us, okay? Looking at the problems we have in higher education and the potential of artificial intelligence and machine learning being applied to those problems to create new solutions. So this becomes part of that table setting. Remember I said earlier that chance favors the prepared, the Louis Pasteur quote. So what we're trying to do is to create programs and experiences that allowed us to walk through this process. I used a map of a train system in DC as the backdrop before, because it occurred to me as I was thinking up through this that these things are all interconnected, but sometimes you can't get there from here. And I think what we're trying to do, at least in our model, is to create those connection points. And that's what the EdTech network is supposed to be doing. That's our orientation. How do we create the solutions to get to the problems in higher education through the discovery and the research into artificial intelligence and machine learning? So this is part of my job, which is kind of fun. Andy, you were asking me earlier, like, what do you do now? So my job is this part. I am the agitator. I am the one, with my colleagues, I shouldn't say it's just me, but I help organize these kinds of events. How do we create environments where people are a little uncomfortable with what it is they're doing and the way they're thinking? How do we stimulate them to think about new ideas in a safe way without feeling like they're being put upon? Once we have those ideas, what can we do to help nurture, cultivate, incubate, bring those ideas from a concept into something that begins to look like a prototype or something that we can start to point to and say, that's a really interesting idea. I like the way that's developing. Finally, then, how do we use that output to then connect and partner to produce the solution? And that's what I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit about those models of how we've been setting that up to do that. So one of the thoughts I might have for you at Ashford today is to think about the environment that you're in and where do you see yourself and where does Ashford see itself in terms of having a landscape, having a network, a system that allows these kinds of events to happen in a, what should I say, in somewhat of a planned. I always thought using the word innovation and managed is a little challenging because sometimes innovation has to be spontaneous. but I think it can be planned and thought for as well with different kinds of programs. So the three approaches that we're using in this EdTech network is the idea of looking at partnerships. I mentioned earlier on our relationship to our industry leaders is different than what it's been before. When we've worked with IBM before, IBM was a vendor. They were selling us a product. We want to say, why don't we work with you and your product, which happens to be Watson, and see what we can create brand new, something that hasn't been done before. And then, big issue around IP, then we'll figure out how do we both make money out of that type of a product. My job, which I think is really on the front end, is this concept of building the community. So when we started looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning in our environment, I discovered we had lots of it going on. We have a guy in the College of Agriculture who's using drones and image recognition to fly over cornfields to identify a disease called rust. Rust is a fungus of some sort that gets on corn plants, decreases yield. So he flies over these fields with these drones, he's taking images. The images are, he's using a back-end AI engine that's comparing images of rust to healthy fields, and then he's able to point out and say, here's where you have issues where it's just beginning to emerge, because he can use these image recognitions. The faculty member in a College of Education who's using scans of students' faces to recognize, I don't know if that's me or not, to recognize whether or not they are understanding the concepts that are being taught. Visual recognition. These two faculty members had no idea they were in essence using the same kinds of technology, both being driven by AI, to do the research. And that's where the idea of building this community, getting those same people into the room, talking about their research becomes really important. Next is spurring the innovation. How do we foster, support, incentivize the creation of these new products? And that's, I'm going to explain a little bit about a couple of these different ones. So let's start with building community. This past fall, we had our first event called EdTech Engage. And you'll see here I marked out who the target audience was. So in Engage, we were really bringing in our, oh, I should have had partners up there, I missed them. Our industry partners, our faculty members, and our staff into one room for a day, digging deep into the concepts behind AI. One of the most interesting, I think one of the most interesting outcomes of that day was a panel discussion where we had set up with an ethicist. So we had an ethicist on stage, we had a computational scientist from the University of Massachusetts, and we had Renata Engel, who's our executive director of the World Campus, talking about the threats of AI, the promise, and this is going to be terrific, and also then there are some issues like student privacy and information security, right, and IP ownership. And it got very interesting, let me just say, it got very interesting on stage because there's no one answer to these kind of issues. But at least we set the table for that kind of a conversation. We're starting in November, end of this month, my first EdTech Connect program, where we'll be going into one of the academic departments, sitting down with a faculty member and doing a bit of a deep dive. She does sentiment analysis, I think I'm getting that word right. And so she's looking at how do we use AI engines to both parse out text to understand meaning and emotion. The Student Associates program I'm hoping to launch in January, where we build some sort of an incentive. And by the way, this is for students online, not just students face-to-face. But how do we create an environment where students want to work with us and have some incentive? They can put it on their resume, but also they get connected up to a researcher, to a content faculty member. Again, creating that opportunity for the Medici effect to take place. The principal innovators, just developing, working on it this morning actually, the model of what that might look like. If you become a principal innovator within our EdTech network, you might get some funding to attend a conference you might not normally go to. You might get some support from one of our staff members to help you advance your idea. But it's something special. We create a community of the leading faculty members who want to work on and advance some of their ideas. So this is going to be an interesting one. I don't know how many of you work with student groups per se, There's a group on campus called Develop Penn State, so it's DevPSU. These are incredibly smart but very geeked out students who could barely organize themselves out of a paper bag but are brilliant with code. And they've come to me and asked to have an AI boot camp. They want to take their students through a 5-week program where they not only learn the overview and the ideas of AI and machine learning, but they also apply it and actually use products like Watson and IPsoft. So I'm helping them design it. My challenge there is kind of staying out of it and letting the students take and keep the ownership of that program. So that'll be a boot camp in January. And then this partner idea. So we had a conversation with some of these industry leaders a couple weeks ago about this new kind of a relationship. And it was a little awkward because you're definitely talking about what's traditionally been a client-vendor relationship. You give us money, we give you product, to changing to say, well, can we do things differently? And the most interesting response of that day, I thought, were from the IBM people. IBM said, hey, we'll bring in some design thinking facilitators and let's sit down and spend a day talking about what a partnership program might be like. It was really a different framework and a different tone. So these are the partnership ideas I've kind of gone through a little bit, looking at finding AI-based companies that want to work with us, bringing to the table the Penn State entities, creating the bridges within Penn State, so that we're linking that agronomy department with the faculty member in psychology. One of the concepts we're trying to use is to leverage what already exists. Like, let's not create something new. Let's find a program or an organization and leverage their work, support their work, and then partner with the industry to create some transformational solutions where in the end we both win. That's going to be a bit of a challenge for us. This is the Spurring Innovation. So this is the part now, I've talked about the agitating, we get people in a room, we do design thinking workshops. Are you familiar with the design thinking methodologies? Have you heard of this? Yes? We're going to be doing an ideation session a little bit after this program this afternoon where we try to get you thinking about new and novel ideas. We just, this weekend, finished a hack experience. How many of you have been to a hack? You familiar with what a hackathon is? Have you heard of hackathon? So it sounds a little weird, right? It's a hackathon, like you get people in and you go in to break code of the government. Actually, they're already doing that on their own. So what a hackathon is, we just did it this weekend. It's a 24-hour student-run intensive experience, in this case, totally face-to-face, but it wouldn't have to be. And what the students do is they accept a challenge, and whoever puts up the challenge provides a little prize. So the EdTech network put up a challenge. Our challenge was, think of a problem you had in higher education and create an instructional technology solution. 24 hours to do it. Those who win, first prize, $99 gift card. Second prize, $50 gift card. I mean, it doesn't take much to do this. So I went on Saturday. I did not stay over 24 hours, I have to tell you. It was my daughter's 25th, so that, you know, I had my priorities. Came back, though, on Sunday to judge them, and the results are just phenomenal. So these are mostly undergraduate students. They're in comp sci, IST, education, business. They come in unformed. They may have a team, but most of the times they don't have a team. They find somebody, hey, Mike, I'll be on your team. What problem do you want to go after? And they hack away at this thing until they create actually a working prototype. And judging, you go around the tables and you look at these various outputs and you make decisions. Now, let me tell you one of them, kind of an interesting one, but students were very concerned about the amount of alcohol that gets poured at the bar. And they want to make sure that they're going to get their share. One group, I'm serious, one group, how this was an educational technology problem, I don't know. Must have had to do with proportions or something, volume control. But they literally built one of those fizz machine things that one of them had the alcohol in it, and the other one had the seltzer in it, and the other one had ice cubes or something. And they built this, it had little gas pumps on it. It was very cool. We had to disqualify him from the educational technology challenge because we couldn't figure out what problem that one fixed. But there were other good ones. I'll give you two words for one that as soon as they said it to me, I was like, oh yeah. Uber tutoring. Okay? So you're sitting in your student thing and you're working on your math assignment and you come up against differential equations and you're like, shoot, I can't get past this one point in my problem. You go to your Uber Tutor app, you type in differential equation, who's out there, hit it, things binged all over the campus. You see students who have already established their profile that they can teach differential equation. And someone says, hey, I'm online, I'll help you out. Or, hey, I'm like 3 tables down from you, I'll come over. Okay, they come over, they help you out, they solve it. When you're done, you go back and you say, Andy Sheen, he was terrific. Click and give an arrow up. After 10 arrows, Andy can start to charge because he's been vetted by a community. Isn't that cool? All of a sudden you start to get, and this can happen literally around the country, but it's those kind of ideas like, I want that idea. That was a great idea. It was a great technology solution they came up to a problem. We do these seed innovation grants. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. The last one is the sponsored grants where we actually get companies to provide resources to help sponsor research around particular projects. Last year we did something called the Nittany Watson Challenge. And we took a certain amount of money. We created a program where students generated ideas to use Watson, and we did some training around it, to come up with solutions that solve specific problems. I'll give you an example. The biggest problem that came up and the one that ultimately received most of the funding was credit transfer. You guys have any issues here with credit transfer? Yeah. Painful experience? Yeah, I see you all grimacing already. So in our case, we have a lot of students who transfer in after 2 years at a community college or, and don't tell anybody this, another Penn State campus. Can you believe not all of our credits transfer in smoothly? It does happen. So the idea was, can we create, when you see Flo on the Progressive commercials, you know, where she points and clicks at the things and it totals up on her tab, what if students had a device like that they This is the hackathon I was talking about. I'm going to move through these quickly. The Nittany, we're changing it this year to the Nittany AI Challenge, so we're not only going to be doing Watson, we're going to be doing Amelia, hopeful TensorFlow from Google. The idea, again, bringing together faculty members and students to come together around how do they apply these technologies to specific problems. So I guess one of the things I'm trying to point to, and I know we're kind of running out of time here, is that we do believe that in our case, artificial intelligence, machine learning is the focusing technology, if you will. Instead of trying to solve everything, we're honing in on one technology. We're trying to build this community of innovation and change and a little bit of uncomfortableness. By the way, something I didn't add earlier on is we have a larger institutional goal right now of transforming education. So there's a whole organization looking at how does higher education at Penn State change to meet the new demands and needs of our learners. As I said, we're looking for industry partners that want to become part of our program. So the question is, what do you do at Ashford? How do you do? What kind of a call of action do you have? And I knew from the beginning that I'm giving you one model, and your model has to be unique and appropriate for your institution. But if we can have just a couple minutes, I would love to hear ideas from you about what you think you might be able to do within the context of Bridgepoint and Ashford University. Well, thank you for that input. That was great. Come on, I know you have ideas. So what's something you think you might be able to do or you would be interested in? Or wouldn't it be cool? Listen, if there's anyone in the room you don't want to have hear this, just tell me and we'll tell them to cover their ears for a minute. But what kind of things would you like to be doing here that if you had, boy, wouldn't it be cool if? Ma'am.
Well, I think it would be great to have our students go to some of these partnership companies that we are currently working with and have them actually go into those companies and start working with those companies directly. Because I know when I was an undergrad and even in a graduate program, there weren't companies that were really accepting us, even though we graduated, you know, from the program, no matter what GPA. and you didn't see that available. So I think if Ashford literally allowed that process to happen for a student, that would be like a stepping stone for that student in whatever industry they wanted to go into.
So wouldn't it be really cool? I love that idea. Wouldn't it be really cool if you were able to upload your resume, or if you were able to identify the top 10 skill sets you have, and then you've got a system that matches that up with an industry that's also identified the need for these top 10 skill sets, and then helps foster that relationship. Maybe make and my thought is it can even be a virtual internship, right? It'd be really cool if you were there at Google and wherever they are, but why couldn't you work with Google researchers around some aspect of their work and have a virtual internship? Wouldn't that be a really innovative added value for both you, the student, and that partner, right? Because now they're getting to see what you're like and your skill sets are, which may lead to, who knows, a job later on. I think that's a great idea. What other ones do you have?
Larry, I've got a couple from
Yes,
the
please.
chat. One attendee said, had great results piloting new courseware. Now let's roll it out. Let's do it. Let's invest in the innovation when it works. And then a second one, assisting, guiding our students in creating plugins for Canvas is a great start. And then someone also seconded the virtual internships is a wonderful idea.
So, you know, the challenge with any of these, and I'm going to just switch a little bit and talk about it from the administrative side of the institution, and Mike, you might feel this pain, and Andy, you may as well. You can't exactly open up every course in every Canvas instance and allow people to start going in and hacking at it, right? Probably not going to be a good experience for the rest of the students should that particular hack fail. So part of the challenge is creating something like a sandbox where students do have an opportunity, maybe submitting an idea, or who knows, maybe submitting code someplace that they say, hey, I wrote this app for plugging into Canvas. I'm going to put it in a safe place. I have a place to test it and see how it runs and get feedback on it. If I were doing something like that, I'd make sure that I have them teamed up with a faculty member who knows that domain so they're not out there loose. But giving students access to that space as well could be a really cool outcome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that was from this side. From online, I've heard nothing from this side. What I did is, we need a mic.
I thought it was really interesting that you added graduate students to be included with support staff. And I think Ashford has an opportunity for that here. We have programs such as CHAMPS mentorship, but I don't know if we've really utilized all our talented students in our master's programs. So they're possibly use them as teacher's assistant or some sort for undergraduate students.
One of the things we've wanted to do, and I got to tell you, we haven't cracked this one, but I've always wanted to do this, was how do we provide research and development opportunities for our graduate students that, and they've told us this many, many times, I would love to work on a project with this faculty member or that faculty member. You think about the added value in this, I hate to use the term separation, but the added value of being a graduate student. So that's probably not going to happen at the undergraduate, too many students and too hard to manage. But when you move into the graduate level, now you're telling me I'm going to have an opportunity to work with the faculty member to design a research project that in a year or 2 years I may get published. In my mind, that becomes a real, one of those added value innovations where I'm going to want to come here because I'm going to have that kind of an experience. And again, can be absolutely done virtually, so it's not tied to a face-to-face experience. Yeah, good one. Thank you. Other thoughts, comments, sir?
First off, thank you so much for your talk. One of the things that constantly goes through my mind is how do we build for us in a different model? What we traditionally have is we have practitioners that teach. And so I think it's important that when you want to see something pushed out to students and you want to see them engage and have that kind of fun that gets them into the flow of learning, that you have to create that with your faculty. And I wonder how we personalize when we constantly preach personalization to students, how do we operationalize that for our faculty who aren't typical faculty but teach online and all over the United States?
Right. So it's a great question and a great challenge. I am wondering, though, a question to that, so don't move too far from the mic. That is, do you think that that is desired by all, most, or maybe some of the faculty who teach for Ashford? In other words, might there be individuals who say, hey, give me my class, I'm going to teach my class, it's a business transaction, I'm good, you pay me, I'm good, I'm out of here. There may be others who say, you know, I'm really interested in this field, I'd love to have a little bit of research funding or support of some sort. There may be a third group that's all they want to do is sort of the research and the development. Do you have a sense of how that breaks out?
I would love to speak to that, but I think someone with a higher pay grade would love to speak to that before I would. I would just say that I think that what we want to do is we want to become that magnet for people that want to get into that flow of teaching, and that we're not just bringing people who want a paycheck. I mean, that's definitely a part of being in business, but as educators, we really want to strive towards those people that want to go beyond the constraints of the floor.
That they want to be learning and growing in their own field as well. How do they leverage their Ashford teaching experience to help them grow in their career? Yeah, good point. It'd be an interesting model to come up with, try to frame out what that would look like for those kind of individuals who want to do that. That's a great idea. Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
We have another comment from online. A wonderful idea would be to start a virtual technology center where the sandbox, other ideas can be piloted, housed until the beta phase. We can also start to integrate mixed reality there and also in our courses. And in that piloting phase, big data and analytics can also be applied so that we, or I, as she says, can have a better understanding of how it would be used in the future.
Interesting. So it goes back to that idea of creating a safe place, if you will, for the experimentation, for the learning. And it wouldn't have to be face-to-face. This can be a virtual space. You know, one of the things we've always wanted to create, so if you create it, we'll buy it from you, is a participant connection tool of some sort, meaning that as a learner, I come in and identify my research interest or my subject matter expertise. Faculty members do the same thing. And an engine of some sort, a connection tool of some sort, constructs those, or perhaps the innovation team puts up a challenge into this virtual space, and it says, we're looking at augmented reality in the sciences. Anyone interested? And you allow your faculty to come in and say, yeah, I like to play in that space. And students say, yes, I would like to come in here as well. Build projects out that way. After a year, maybe they get some nominal amount of funding, something that supports them. They have a chance to report back to the larger organization to say, here's what we did, here's what we tried, here's the output of that, or here's the results. May or may not be ready for full-time distribution, but here's where we went with that. Good idea. Thank you.
I feel like we have an opportunity, and I'd like to see this happen more often with our platform on social media. I see that we're trying to bridge our gap between in-house staff, faculty to students. I feel like we have an opportunity to maybe do that with our student services side, our advisors, our enrollment with our students, because a lot of our advisors have been here for a very long time. And I'd like to see us expand it and reach out on the student services side and use social media to kind of bridge that gap with advisors and their students, like we are with our faculty.
So sort of like a more of a community-based environment where you get the experts providing information, but also allowing your student population to interact with that as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. It's a great idea. Good. Okay. Other thoughts? Listen, I hope that, and I know I've kept you a little bit later than I'm supposed to, but I hope that you got some ideas today of something you might be able to either champion within your own space. It might be a very small, back to that continuum, might be on the incremental end, or it might be on the transformational end. But don't allow the idea that it has to be transformation stop you from taking something as a first step at the increment. They will add up over time, and we're always focused on what we're doing to improve the experience for the learner. Okay? Thank Thank you for your attention. You've been a great group.